Welcome to Meet the Creators, a podcast dedicated to the art of business and the business of art. Meet the creative minds behind marketing campaigns, commercials, business, and art. Tune in to better understand the value of creative minds in marketing and business as we build the bridge between business and creative artists. What's up, y'all? This is Mike Ogata, and this is the Meet the Creators podcast. And today I'm here with Julia Landauer. She is a professional NASCAR driver and also a motivational speaker. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give a little bit of background information about your career?
Yeah, for sure. So, as you said, Julia Landauer, I'm a race car driver, and I got started in racing when I was 10 years old. It was an activity that my parents wanted me and my siblings to be able to do. They really liked that it was co ed, they liked that we could all be together, and I loved it right away. I loved that I was a scrawny little kid that was maneuvering a machine. I loved going fast and winning, and I told them that, I was so proud of myself and I loved working hard at the racetrack. So, can we try to figure out how to do it professionally? And we did. And I got into racing cars when I was 13. When I was 14, I won a championship in the Skip Barber Racing Series, which is kind of like a racing school where people like Danica Patrick and Marco Andretti have raced in it. So I became a champion there at 14 and then kept climbing the ranks. And I also stayed in school, and my education was super important to me. So I really wanted to go to college, and Stanford was my first choice. And I eventually got in and studied something called Science, Technology, and Society, which Bachelor of Science, really interdisciplinary. It allowed me to kind of dabble in a lot of different subjects, which was really great because I knew that I was going to be, leaving college and moving to Charlotte, North Carolina to pursue racing. So I really wanted to learn about a lot of different things. And yeah, then I was also on Survivor while I was in college, which was
Mhm.
an experience, and learned I'm not great for reality TV, but that's okay. And moved to Charlotte. I've been in Charlotte now for almost 8 years, which is crazy because I'm from New York City originally, so it's very different. And I've been climbing the ranks of the minor leagues of NASCAR in the US and Canada. And in 2020, which was my last full season, I raced in the European NASCAR series where I finished fifth, which is the highest for an American ever.
Mhm.
So now it's kind of, everything with COVID and the funding side and the business side of racing has meant that the last year or two has been kind of a figuring out what the next chapter is, and still doing that, but always love getting back in a car and going racing. And the whole time since college, I've also been doing motivational speaking, as you mentioned. Luckily, I found a way that I could pay my bills and inspire people and have a lot of fun. And yeah, I feel quite lucky.
Amazing, amazing career so far, and congratulations on everything you've done so far.
Thank you.
Um, I'm curious, about what was it like, racing go-karts and being around with all these boys in this very hyper masculine society of things.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of that question of what's it like being a girl in racing or a woman in racing,
Mhm.
because on the one hand, it's normal, right? Like that is all I'm used to. I don't know what it's like
Mhm.
to be one of the guys. But on the other hand, I definitely noticed differences growing up. At first, it was like, oh, the other 12-year-old boys have cooties, and clearly I don't. And so it was like there's a weird social kind of. It felt like boys and girls were not like friends anyway at that age. But then I had really good friends. Throughout kind of the teenage years, I didn't notice a ton of issues. Like there were certain situations that, someone's dad told me that I wouldn't make friends by racing really hard. And
Mhm.
it's like, well, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to race. And so like stuff like that. But for the most part, I had a really supportive team. My parents were super supportive. I was competitive. So I think I had a lot of respect. But looking back, I can recognize how some things were like a little sexist.
Right.
But then I feel like as I got into racing cars and I became older, I think I couldn't just like be an oblivious kid that was just having fun racing. And I found that I kind of had to work harder to earn the respect of my team, especially if they hadn't raced with a woman before or had a woman driver. And I think there are just so few examples of women who win, and everyone wants to win. And so kind of a little more activation energy to get the buy-in from the team. But I found that once I had that, they were so supportive. Most of the teams were so supportive, and kind of could recognize some of the subtle differences in how I was treated, and then like stood up for me and advocated for me.
Hmm.
So I've been able to have a lot of kind of male allies, I think, in the sport, which
Great.
has been really helpful.
Amazing. How do you keep going when you hear certain discouraging things from others or obstacles and such?
Well, it's interesting because, like, on the one hand, like, I don't really care what other people say, and I know that other people are gonna say some
Mhm.
bad stuff now and then, but on the other hand, like, I've always been a bit of a people pleaser, and so it's more like if I hear stuff, I'm like, "I wanna prove them wrong. I'm not, just this girl racer or whatever," and, but I don't know, I think I like to t I at this point, I really tune out a lot of any negative stuff. I'm too old, I don't care, like, people are gonna form their own
Mhm.
opinions, but, when I was younger, I definitely had to, like, vent to, like, people who I cared about, who were, like, my support system, my family, friends, siblings, but you have to learn how to have some thick skin, so, yeah, it's a balancing act.
Yeah, definitely have to have thick skin and just really just go for it. I'm sure your parents and others just really encourage you to go for it and succeed.
Yeah, I got really lucky, with my parents. They always encouraged me and my sister and brother to be great, to kind of go after things full force, and they really supported us in anything that we wanted to work hard in. So that was lucky, but I mean, societal pressures are still strong, right? And like media is
Mhm.
still really influential in a both good and bad way. And I don't know. It's weird to like kind of look back and see how much support I had, and yet how much I still like succumb to some of the societal pressures, or the negative talk. And I learned kind of, especially when I was in my early 20s, the importance of like positive self-talk and not
Mhm.
letting yourself get down. And we're in our own heads 24/7, and
Right.
so if we have a negative voice in there, that will get very tiring. So learn to kind of be my own coach and help give myself my own pep talks was really powerful.
I'm curious about, so you went to Stanford, and if that's not enough of a workload in itself, what inspired you to apply for Survivor and do all that?
Ye Yeah, so, I would say I've always been competitive, and there's always been, like, cool stuff, and I was talking with my roommate my sophomore year, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, like, all of the women who are on Survivor, a lot of them are really badass, and, you're so tough," and I was like, "Yeah, like, we're so tough," and, I was really young, I was the youngest person on my season, and I realized like that was the first time I was in a situation where I couldn't trust anyone. And I think the mental and strategic part was something that I struggled with a lot more. I think, if I were to do it now 10 years later, I think it would be a super different outcome. But I also like I'm not sure I'm like deceptive enough and mean enough to
Mhm.
really thrive on that show. And because it's really authentic, and yeah, it's fun's not the word that I would use because it was miserable a lot of the time,
It looked
but,
pretty
like,
cruel.
oh, yeah, I got really badly sunburned. I remember social media had kind of taken off by then. It was 2013 when it was airing, and, like, I remember, like, people were commenting that, like, my armpit hair grew back, and they were really mean about it. I was like, "Well, what do you expect? I'm pale and on an island, and, like, I don't have a razor," and it's just, like, little stuff like that to have all those, like, little snarky comments after we got back from going through this, like, very, very exciting and frustrating experience was people are too much. Let me just say people are too
Right.
much.
Would you give a little bit of advice about like how do you deal with that? Because I mean, we're in such like a situation with social media where we all don't really feel good about ourselves. Like we're under a microscope, we judge everyone, and then you got put like into a huge microscope with that. Like, what advice would you give to folks?
Yeah, I think part of it is, they always tell you not to look at the comments and not to read the comments, but a
Hmm.
lot of us do anyway. And I think there comes a point where you just realize like this is no longer a healthy way to spend my time. I think part of it is, you kind of want some of the validation, like you want to see the good comments, right?
Hmm.
So I think it was partially finding a balance, partially like wanting to learn what people were thinking of me, because it actually was helpful. Because there are comments that you realize like maybe they're rooted in some truth, and maybe there's something that I can learn about how I'm presenting myself. But then there are others that are just obnoxious. And so I think it comes down to, if you do choose to read comments, to kind of, I don't know, like practice like just like letting them roll and not really
Hmm.
thinking much about them. But I do think like you shouldn't go looking at comments unless you're like in the right mindset to do it. And like
Hmm.
I've never gotten any alerts or notifications for any of my social media. And so, going to look at it is a very intentional thing. And I find that to be helpful. And if you're not in a good place, do not look at comments, because it's not productive. And I think it's totally fine to kind of just like put it away for a little bit.
That makes sense. Just make sure that you're in the right state of mind when you look at
Yeah.
comments or even using social media. You don't need to have that on all day long.
No. Or even like I find that if I look at social media after I've exercised or after like something where I've like put effort in, I'm in a better headspace, and that's a good time. I really try not to look at social media at all in the morning. Don't need that energy to start the day. And yeah, if you're, I think like the doom scrolling or hate looking, or people like
Hmm.
that, if people make you feel a bad certain way, like don't look at their profiles. It's kind of a mind over matter situation.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's something we're all navigating all together. It's such a new age with social media. Um, so I'm curious, so when you're going to Stanford and you chose what drew you into going into motivational speaking?
Yeah, so I got quite lucky with that, actually. So when I was a junior in college, the communications team at Stanford asked if I would participate in their TEDx event. And I couldn't do it because the TEDx weekend was the same weekend as the live finale for Survivor. So I had to be in LA for that. So luckily, they wanted me again my senior year. And it was really great because every year they were putting on a TEDx program, and they usually had maybe like one or two students throughout the day. And I got to work with a communications coach, and I got to really understand how I could take all of my experiences and turn them into really compelling stories and create that narrative arc. And I, my talk was, can nice girls win races? And it's looking at the
Mhm.
stereotypes against women, and how we can fight against them to be successful, however we define success. And I gave the talk. One, it was super cool to make people laugh on stage. Like I really liked being like the motivation slash entertainer. I thought that that was a really fun way to think about it. Like people are here to have a good time, and I want people to take something away from it, but I also want them to, um, you know, have fun and laugh and get out of their own heads. So I love that. I then also really liked when I was leaving the auditorium, I was behind two women who didn't know that I was right behind them, and one really agreed with what I had to say, and the other one really
Mhm.
disagreed. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I can like spark this kind of debate. This is really, really cool." And so then the year after I graduated, I started pitching myself because I had this beautiful, TEDx video. I knew that I could illustrate how I could tell a story, and I got hired decently quickly by a women's empowerment, women's leadership conference. And that really jump started my career. I was introduced to an agent that I worked with for a long time. And I then just like made it a longer keynote. And there's such a cool energy of being on stage. It's not the same kind of
Mm,
nerves and energy as when I go race, but it's not like super different either. And then,
right.
yeah, so I loved it. And after I gave enough keynotes where I knew that like pretty consistently people enjoyed listening to me, and I was able to create value for them, it really started taking off. So it's been quite lucky and fun, and it's fun that there are some stories that I've been telling since day one, and then there are other ones where I will add new things based on what I'm going
Mhm.
through in my life. Like I've recently started talking about the importance of always asking for what you want. Especially women tend to wait to be invited to things and to instead just be clear and concise and ask for what you want. That's something that I went through over the last few years and like kind of learned a little more about. So it's a fun creative process.
That's pretty cool. I'm curious because a lot of people say I have a fear of public speaking. Do you have any advice to that? And I'm also like wondering like if there's anything you compare that to, with the racing.
Yeah, so I can't, when I've talked with people, I feel like either people love speaking on stage or they hate it. I feel like there's no middle ground. Like people don't feel like so about it. I like I don't I get nervous, and I think I get more nervous like I want to make sure that I am like being valuable for these people in their time and that I'm going to do the good job. But I don't really get scared like in a debilitating way. I
Hmm.
think it's real. Like my heart races before I go on stage every single time. Like, and I have to really incorporate some deep breathing techniques just to help calm myself down. But they're
Hmm.
excited nerves. So I think breathing is a really important thing. I think, for if you're getting on stage, practice a lot. Like even though I've been telling similar versions of my keynotes for a long time, go through several run throughs of my 45-minute talk before every new client. Like I make sure that the transitions are perfect. And the more you're able to practice and perfect it in your practice, the easier and more familiar it will be on stage.
Hmm.
Because like the audience can trip you up. Like if you perceive people as either not being engaged, or a lot of times when people are listening, there's a very straight face. Like I think about when I'm listening to a keynote speaker, even if I'm really enthralled by what they're saying, I might be sitting there like just listening to it. And when you
Hmm.
see that, it can really throw you off, right? Like so it's you kind of have to have a decent amount of confidence in what you're saying. And something that I continue to struggle with, but super important, is to speak slowly enough so that you can breathe properly. Because when you're on stage, you can
Mm.
start speaking really, really quickly
Aha.
and then you get out of
Yeah.
breath. And there was one time when my stylist had put me in an outfit where I had a high waisted belt. So it was like right on my rib cage. And I had started speaking so quickly. And then I got to a point I was like, oh no, I can't take a deep breath. I can't get a deep breath with this tight belt on me. And I was like, okay, so, um, all right. And it was such a mess and I was so embarrassed. But you learn these things and then you try not to repeat them.
I see. So yeah, definitely practice, 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 and be prepared. You'll always be nervous, but breathing helps a ton, and just go for it, huh?
Exactly.
All right, maybe I'll have to take that advice, and I'll make that as one of my next goals is to speak out there on stage.
And one other thing is that I also like to think of speaking on stage as just having a conversation with the audience. Like the way that I would talk
Mm.
to a friend, the way I would talk to anyone, maybe a slightly more formal situation. But the way I would talk in person, that's how I also talk on stage. I'm not there to preach to anybody. I'm there to have a conversation with the audience. And I think having that perspective can kind of take some of the edge off. At least for me, it does.
That makes a lot of sense. And then also, how about also this? Does storytelling play any role in your public speaking or
Oh,
your motivational
yeah.
speaking?
Completely. Good point. Yeah, so every speaker has a different style, but I root all like I talk about lessons that I've learned a lot of the time and things that I've learned through my career, and it's all rooted in stories. Some things from when I was
Hmm.
11, some things from more recently, but I try to create that narrative arc um, to just be relatable, to be able to share details that even though most people are not race car drivers and most people do not have the same background that I have, the more detail I can give in a story about my emotions or what I was thinking or what I was going through, I think the more that people can relate. And if people can relate to you, then they're going to want to listen to you. And I think that's
Hmm.
where kind of the power in the speaking really comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what at my production company, we just really try to hone in storytelling because that's just trumps everything out there with
Totally.
making engagement. So now I'm learning, motivational speaking, racing. What does a typical day for you with training and everything look like if there is such a thing?
There is no such thing. It really it totally depends. I mean, like when I'm really actively in season, I physically train every day. I sleep a lot. But I really take care of what needs to be done. So like for the last 2 weeks, I've had two different keynotes that I've had to give. One was in person,
Hmm.
and I had to drive to South Carolina. One was virtually. So a lot of my time is spent reviewing the keynote, practicing it. If I practice it and I feel like something wasn't right, I then have to fix the thing, and then I go through and practice again. With sponsorship development and everything with that, it's really about just really digging all the time to see where you can get partners. And then
Hmm.
sometimes I'm strategizing other ideas and other things I want to pursue. And sometimes they go somewhere, sometimes they don't, and it's just experimenting. And then definitely try to unplug and enjoy cooking, or actually my boyfriend does most of the
Hmm.
cooking. I do the eating and the washing of the dishes, but be there for him, morally supporting him while he cooks. And yeah, I think that working hard, relaxing hard, doing the
Hmm.
physical activity, that's basically what I do most days. And then there's traveling. If I ever have to travel for any of the gigs, sometimes I'll do sightseeing, try to see friends, whatever it might be.
Mm. Nice. So that helps you stay balanced, to unplug. What about for racing? What type of training are you doing for that, and how often?
Yeah. So I'm not racing as much right now, so it's more just exercising on my own. But when I'm in
Hmm.
season, I work with a trainer who's about a half hour away. It's Pit Fit is the name now, and they work with a lot of racers, and it's everything from cardio training to strength to neck exercising, because you have all the G forces, so building up the neck
Mm.
strength, neurological training, and everything from like depth perception to kind of peripheral vision to reaction times. We incorporate a lot of apps into our training, or we'll do something cardio wise that's like to fatigue, and then go have to do something mentally, because when you're driving, you're muscling around a big machine, but it's also the
Mm.
engine's right in front. So it can be 150 degrees in the car during the summer. And you're basically like having to fully perform in this sauna that's 3,400 pounds, racing against all these other drivers that also want to win. So it's this really interesting mix of like endurance and extreme mental agility and motivation. And if the car is not running well, then you need to adapt or you need to change things, and it's just exhausting. And so we'll also do some sauna work. I was going to say that what's really cool about racing, and it's co-ed. There are some all women series, but mostly it's co-ed, and especially in sports cars and stock cars, because of the seat positioning and because of how the cars are, it's not a brute strength sport. It's more of an endurance. So
Mm.
there is a more equal playing field between men and women. I think there are certain series, like I think me at my build at 5'5" and kind of petite, like I think I would have a hard time in a Formula One car. I think those are
Hmm.
so powerful and create so many G's. But for the most part, yeah, it's really cool that racing allows for the co-ed nature of the sport. Um, and like I have to work really hard, but there's nothing innately more challenging for me in the car than there is for a guy, and I think that's really really cool.
That is really, really cool. It sort of breaks the barrier
Hmm.
in that situation. I was watching a Forbes interview that you did, and then you said something about starting in race car driving is sort of like starting a business. I would love if you
Mm-hmm.
touched on that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think a lot of maybe people know it more like with Drive to Survive and some of the shows that have been coming out. But racing is a very, very financially driven sport. It's extremely expensive.
Mm.
It's very prohibitive in terms of getting into the sport, because even go karts are so expensive. Um, And so, a lot of families pay for their kids early on. And my parents were very upfront with me that they were not going to pay for my racing forever. And so, if I wanted to continue, I was going to have to learn everything from how to articulate ROI to potential partners, to being
Mm.
creative in what my offerings could be, to understanding, things about being a public figure, all this stuff. And so, it really is like, if you're not if you don't have a trust fund or like family businesses that are helping to pay the way for the development series, you really have to look at it as, okay, I'm a startup where me and my racing and maybe any other things are the product, and we have to fine tune them, and we have to make sure they're working really well through training and simulator work and all this stuff. And then you have to get funding for it. So, and there are a lot of different models. Some people are able to get like really authentic third party sponsorship. I think that's really hard. It's hard for a driver by
Mhm.
themselves to create enough value at this point. Um, but then, maybe it's an investor model. There are some racers who have literally like had people invest in them, and then eventually they pay them back. So it's, and some people utilize social media. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, I think, but it requires creativity and that hustle and like that 24/7 thinking about it, working on it. Even over the past few weeks, I've been like waking up in the middle of the night with ideas and thinking through things for the specific stuff that I have going on right now, which I can't talk about yet, but it's just
Mhm.
like, okay, how do I build this? How do I make this happen? And just like, it's wonderful, but it's exhausting.
Oh my goodness. I can relate. I've been doing freelance video production for 10 years, but then we started our business, me and two other co-founders, about 2 years ago. So I'm just learning everything about entrepreneurship and
Oh,
starting a
yeah.
business.
What's been
It's just
like
so much
kind of the
stuff.
most surprising thing for you?
I think for me, just coming out of my shell, just really understanding that people do want to help you, and there's a world of knowledge out there. You just have to, like you said, ask for help. And once you start to play in a different field, you learn that like everyone there's an abundance, and people want to help you and help you with your business.
Yeah.
So that, and then starting this podcast has been amazing. Just the people I've been able to engage with and just see their hustle has inspired me just to keep going.
Yeah, and to that point, kind of piggybacking off of that, one thing that I learned along the way and something that my parents helped me with a little bit was that, it's so important, even if you're feeling discouraged or even if you feel like you've been banging your head against the wall trying to make something happen, like it's so important for founders or, any of us to really maintain that enthusiasm. I think because if
Hmm.
we're not enthusiastic and if we don't fully believe in what we're doing, then there's no way that anyone else is. Like we have to be 100% on go mode, sell mode, even, like for me, whether it's speaking or racing, like if I'm pitching myself, right? Before I had representation for speaking, I was doing a lot of my own pitching and I would send out like dozens and dozens of emails, you know, I'm a speaker. I'm a motivational speaker. I'm a racer.
Hmm.
Like, do you want to? Are you looking for speakers for your event? And it was like, no, 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 no. But then every
Mm.
email still has to maintain that enthusiasm because then there'll be the one yes. It's like, cool, great, got that boost of morale that I needed. And yeah, that was a really important lesson. If you look discouraged, then people are gonna have a hard time buying into you.
That's huge right there. I mean, that
Yeah.
even as a leader myself, like I've caught myself where I've said I was tired and I said something that was like, I don't know, I don't feel good about this. And then my co-founder was like, Mike, you can't say that around them. They're
Right.
totally gonna pick that up. Like even though you're human, you just can't, like, because then they'll get
You
lazy
can't
or
be
they'll
human
feel
to
like you're
them. You got to be
optimistic.
you got to be superhuman. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which is funny. We put on all these masks and everything, but we got to do it. We got to win. So we're all rooting for
Yeah.
each other.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm curious. So you've been like fundraising and pitching. Has this been always something you've been doing at a young age, or like just to keep racing?
Yeah, so actually my parents, I think I was 16 or so when my parents were like, "All right, girl, you got to learn about the business side." And my parents are not business people. They're two professionals. So we were all learning along the way. But I looked at, I had heard in different seminars like approach brands and companies that you relate to. So when I was in high school, the dressmaker Betsy Johnson, kind of like an eclectic woman who started her own fashion line, she was really big, and like we were wearing all of her dresses to different parties and all the bat and bar mitzvahs in New York and everything. And I thought, okay, perfect. I love her dresses. I'm gonna go pitch her for sponsorship. I'm sure she'll want to give me, $100,000 to go racing. And I like typed stuff up and I put a pitch together in an envelope, and I literally went down with my dad to the headquarters and very confidently handed the envelope to the receptionist. I was like, "Can you please see that Betsy Johnson gets this? This is a sponsorship proposal." And he's like, "Yeah, okay." And I left like fully confident that she was going to reach out. And my parents, like, kind of just supported me doing that to kind of show me that it's not that easy, right? It's not just ask,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's important to ask for what you want, you don't always get what you want. Um, so then I started getting more strategic and understanding how I could really, I was trying to solve the partners or the company's needs. Like, how could they use me to benefit them? And that was the big lesson. And I was able to pitch a lot. It didn't go in many places in college, but I did get the experience of meeting with a lot of really important and big decision making people. And yeah, it was a very tedious learning process to kind of learn the nuances of what you need to do to pitch yourself. It was easier in the speaking. Speaking was always,
Mm-hmm.
it's very clear. It's like people know that they're going to pay their speakers to come in and give a motivational keynote, right? So it was a matter of, am I going to fit the theme of the event that they have, or am I in the price range that they're going to do? But for sponsorship, it's much harder. It's a lot larger dollar amounts. It's trying to share why it's worth it, like all the ROI,
Mm-hmm.
and every company has different objectives, and so it requires a ton of research, a ton of asking questions and having that conversation. So yes, long answer to your question. I've been doing that for a while, and then now I'm represented by Octagon, and so we go into it together. But I still
Uh-huh.
really like to be involved, because at the end of the day, I am the main thing that any company will be buying into, and I like to be hands on with that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, talk about because you're a brand and your own personal brand. How do you how do you learn that, just personal branding and the value about that and teaching others just to promote themselves?
I'm not sure I've done it well yet. I think I have a clear brand, and whether or not it's something that people love, I think is yet to be determined. But I actually, through Survivor, I really learned the importance of it sounds so corny, but being authentically you. And for backstory,
Mhm.
I had, because you're playing for $1 million, I had kind of gotten it in my head that since I was a college student, like, why would anyone want to give me $1 million if I played as well as like a single parent or someone, right? And so I decided not to tell people. And in concealing such a big part of myself, that was what I've had a hard time with, because I just wasn't being my authentic self. I was worried about what people were thinking. And at the same time, because I was a teenager in these really formative years in racing, like, people gave me a lot of unsolicited advice, especially as like a New Yorker, as a female, all these labels
Mm.
that I had. And so people who meant well were telling me things like, "Oh, well, don't talk about things that make you different, or don't, all these things of not what not to do." And because I was a kid, I was like, "Oh, okay, well, these people are adults, they know what they're talking about." And I realized, like, in trying to please everybody, I just kind of diluted my personality. So after that, all of that, after seeing how Survivor was airing, and I definitely got the boring edit, but it was
Mhm.
justified, I think, with what I was presenting. I really made the active decision to think about how I wanted people to feel when they were around me, or when they were looking at my social media or talking with me. And I knew that I wanted to be high energy. I wanted to help people feel inspired and empowered. I wanted people to feel comfortable around me. I wanted to be relatable. So I just practiced that. Like, anytime I met someone new, I was really intentional about practicing what version of myself I wanted to bring to the table. And over time, it becomes more natural. And then you become more
Mhm.
comfortable letting your natural, quirky self shine, for lack of a better phrase.
That makes sense. I get a sense of that,
Yeah.
just by the way you've treated me so far. Very kind, and I feel the energy as well. So I'm very
Oh,
happy for you that you've
fantastic.
discovered
Thank
that.
you.
So talk about, we've talked about race car driving, motivational speaking, and your career. Talk about, like, what are some of your next goals? What do you see in your vision?
Yeah, so I still have some racing that I want to do. So that is something that I'm pushing hard. I've also, over the last year, over a year now, I've been really kind of doing a deep dive into everything Web3 related, and everything from crypto to NFT
Mm.
communities, and really just trying to understand kind of what the potential might be. So I'm, exploring some things in that route, maybe how to bridge motorsports and Web3 a little bit more. But I don't know, there's like a lot of like little projects that I can't be specific about that I'm like trying to
Hmm.
see if they get any traction, but I'm really, as I get older, and I feel like such a dweeb for saying that as I get older, but I really want to be able to continue building things. I really like kind of coming up with ideas and figuring out how to make them happen. And so I think part of it is figuring out which avenues are ones where I have that power and that control to be able to do that. There are a lot of areas where you need a lot of other things to out of your control to fall into place. And so yeah, I'm exploring. I want to continue speaking for as long as people want to listen to me. I think it's really fun, and maybe there's a way to build that out a little bit more. But yeah, I'm not. There's a lot that I want to do, and I can't give you a definitive plan. Eventually I want to move back to New York because my family's there, my friends are there.
Hmm.
But besides that, it's kind of a see how it goes situation.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure you'll get there with everything. I don't know. It's a random idea. I was like, I wonder if you should just start a podcast and start interviewing folks.
Right, like people I've definitely thought about that, and I don't have a fantastic reason as to why I haven't, but I think part of
Hmm.
it's like some of the other stuff that's been going on, but it's been on the whiteboard of ideas.
Awesome. We'll be in touch if you ever want to do it. I can
That's
give you any
right.
tips
That's
to get
right.
started.
Thank you.
um, of course. And then I'm curious, what do you hope to give or inspire to the next generation?
I obviously a lot of what I look through is through the lens of how to help with equality. I think I've been really impressed as to how much kind of like gender dynamics have changed from when I was a kid to now, even in just like kind of movies we see, entertainment shows that we see. So I'm optimistic that we'll continue as a society to show more and more of like real people experiences that aren't just stereotyped. So that's really cool. I hope to be able to contribute to that, to inspire. I think I've recognized that a lot of people have like external forces that put expectations on them. And I hope to help inspire people to kind of like take them into consideration, maybe, but really focus on what makes you really excited, what makes you feel really proud of yourself, and learning how to do things even if it's breaking the mold, even if you're scared. Like that's my big messaging right now, and something that I talk about a lot is like doing it anyway and learning how to manage fear. Don't worry about getting rid of fear, but manage it so that you can pursue the things that are exciting anyway. And a quote that I live by that I found on Pinterest, by a woman, Arata Svetlana, and now we're friends. And she had this quote where she said, "If it's both terrifying and amazing, then you should definitely pursue it." And I
Mhm.
love that just simple mantra. Like, it can be scary and exciting, it can be nerve wracking and worthwhile. And just because there are two seemingly conflicting emotions doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And I really love that. I think that's been a guiding principle for me. And I hope to like continue to share that with people. Um, and I hope to kind of help people live their best life on whatever scale that is. Some people have really big dreams that are grand and overwhelming, and other people have really smaller dreams that are equally important and equally justified. And just, having the conviction to go forward and doing what makes you tick. And I think that's, I personally believe that like societies or teams or groups will thrive when every member is an active participant. So the more that I can help every member be an active participant is kind of an ongoing life goal.
Aha. And you are definitely doing that already. I see your
Oh,
vision and I
thanks.
feel it. I am personally inspired to be real, so thank you. Where can we find you on social media and everything?
Yeah, so most social medias, I'm at Julia Landauer, at JuliaLandauer. And please always feel free to reach out. I love chatting with people. My DMs are open. It's really cool to hear other people's stories, especially, people who may not be like me, may not be doing the same thing, but have had similar experiences. I think that's really cool. And yeah, we're all a lot more related, or a lot more similar than we are different. And I think especially
Hmm.
in our culture right now, there's everything's so divisive and everyone's trying to drive everyone apart. And it's like, well, we're all human. We all have the same basic needs, and there's no reason not to be compassionate towards others.
Heck yes. Yeah, everybody, you can do it. You can overcome your fears, just like Julia. Follow her story. That's it for this podcast. For Flipbird Films, Meet the Creators. Flock with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Meet the Creators. I hope you found value in today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and please share with a friend.